Welcome to another Tech Stuff Tuesday. This week I'm going to move around in a chair, and it'll sound like I'm farting, but I'm not. And we're going to look at fixing and changing how this terminal is done. Now this may have happened to you if you have this kind of sub. What is going on here is these leads, there are two of them that come off the coil. They are heat shrunk, and they go over to a ring terminal. It goes onto a steel bolt, and this just crimp on. It's also soldered ring terminal, just a like a pot metal. It's relatively strong, but they do fatigue and break, and that's what's happened here. Is if they twist at all down here, they will break off. How does this happen in the first place? Well, we've got this bolt and this bolt, and I'm guessing what happens is when you go to tighten this bolt, you tighten to a point where this one starts to turn. It turns it up top, tweaks it just a little bit, the metal fatigues, and this guy breaks. This is not a very good way of connecting things. It does go through the steel bolt, which is not the best conductor, through pot metal ring terminal, also not a phenomenal conductor. It goes through this, and then you go to another ring terminal that you have on here, and then off to your amp, whichever method that you're using. So we're going to improve this by doing direct leads. So what do we need? Well, we've got a 9/64, which is also a 3.5 millimeter. This is going to go on top of the bolt up here. So you gotta make sure you have that. We've got a 7/16 deep well socket. That will be required to get this nut off. You'll need a utility knife or razor, preferably one that is a fresh blade that can cut very quickly and through some thick stuff that's going to do it safely. Heat shrink to go back over once we're done. The wire that you're actually going to be using for the direct leads. In this case, we're using Sundown Audio 8 gauge, available on emfcaraudio.com. And to make these happen together, we've got these. It's basically just a butt connector with no insulation on or anything. So we can put the wire in half of this and the lead in the other half, crimp them, and then solder each end on there. So you will need a soldering iron and solder as well. We start by taking these two nuts off. This one is nylon lined, so it will be a little bit harder to get off, and you may have to fight the motor a little bit with your socket. That one is most of the way off, so I didn't have to put a whole lot of effort on that one. But this one, you're going to have to make sure that you hold on top. Now we've got both of these nuts off. This guy, we've got one metal washer, and you may have to use a pick tool or something like a screwdriver, something inspirational. The pick tool is not getting it loose, and I suspect that this is going to be glued in place. There might be a little bit of glue in there. There is a plastic sleeve that goes all the way through top and bottom. This is not coming out too easily, so we're going to use a hammer just enough to tap that out. Our washer comes off, and now we've got the plastic piece that was on the top. You see where this broke off from the original ring terminal, but we still have the plastic end in the bottom. Now what you can do is take a 5/16 drill bit, and we're not trying to drill through the plastic. We're just trying to grab the plastic. So you can turn it just a little bit, and you see it came right off. And you can do that if it happens on the other side as well. The hole itself is larger, so you can put it through the hole, make it so the bait just grabs on it, twists it, and if there's any glue securing it or anything like that, it'll pop it right out. So now we've got the hole clear all the way through. We've got to get this loose. Now we're going to want to actually score the heat shrink all the way back here because we are going to have to cut off this connector, which is actually about right here, but we need some more to crimp onto after. So we're going to go all the way to back here, and this is where you've got to be careful and use a little bit of common sense, but we're going to score it all the way through. You may have to twist and turn these leads a little bit, and that's fine. But you've got to make sure that you go all the way through, and it is kind of thick. So if we've got a good score mark across here, we're gonna come down. And ideally you should not be bringing a razor or anything towards you. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to go the other way. So after we get that scored, it still might be a little bit sticky and a little bit tricky to get off of here, and I have not found a great idea to getting this any easier. You just kind of have to make sure you're all the way through and then try to get the blade under that. Being very careful to not stab yourself. Okay, so that is almost all the way coming loose. There's a little bit we've got to clean up right there. So there we go. I've taken that whole piece off. Now we're down to where that this was crimped on before, and we're going to cut it off right at the metal edge. So now what we are left with is bare side. That will give us enough to crimp back onto. So we're going to take our sleeve and we're going to solder the wire onto it after we've crimped it. So when you crimp it, you want to leave just a little bit of a gap there, and then we can solder in the edge of what's left right there. Now I want to make sure that you're using a really good set of crimpers, not the kind that you pick up that are like $5 or $6 and they're super thin and they have just kind of that janky little edge right there. Those do not do very good well. They just kind of make it flat. This, you might notice, actually puts a divot in it. It's not just going flat across. Those don't work very well. You can just pull those things right off. So we've got a little bit of a gap on either end. We can solder it. Now for getting this crimped onto that lead, I found it's a little bit easier if you actually put the end in the crimper, not applying enough pressure to actually do anything with compressing it, just getting it to where it'll hold it in place. We're working with a limited amount of space here. And I am right-handed, and I found that attacking it this way works out a little bit easier. If you're left-handed, you might try from the other side. But if you can manipulate it into place like so, then apply pressure, we've got this crimped on. And if you've got a little bit of space on here, which hopefully you will, you can go back in here and solder this edge as well. You may not be able to get all the way around because this is very difficult to twist around, but we are going to get a little bit of solder on up here. Now with the top edge soldered, the only thing we have left is to put heat shrink on. So you want to make sure that you've got enough that after it will shrink up a little bit, that it will still cover a little on the edge here, a little on the edge there. You don't want to go too much because it'll make this entire thing too stiff up here or down here. So you don't want to be in excess of what you're using there. Now with that centered on that connection, we're going to use a heat gun. You can use a lighter, though I don't recommend it, particularly around things that can catch fire from open flame. A hair dryer could also work. This I didn't get exactly centered on there, but we've still got plenty up here, plenty down here. And then we've got to feed it back through the hole. So now that that is fed back through, you can see what we got going over here. We have to make this so this can't move up and down, and for that we're just going to put some CA glue. You could also use epoxy, anything with some viscosity to it that you can kind of build up at the bottom and hold it in place. So we are going to use CA glue. I've got a fair amount of glue down here on this one side, and it's going to seep to the front and the back a little bit. You may be able to hit it from the other side too, but the biggest thing is just going to make sure that you can't move it around, and it's solid, so it's in place. And there's one down. Now, key points with all this, you want to make sure that this wire is not too far down, because it does need to still move. The cone moves up and down. This is going to flex right here, and for that same reason, it can't be too high as well. So you want to try to position it as close as you can to the original position. I'm assuming that's how they intended it to work fine. So I would try to do that. And you also want to make sure that this, when you bring it in, does not come in too far inward, because the cone actually does come down. You want to make sure that the cone is not going to hit the top of this, because that would be bad. That would end up breaking it. I hope you found this informative on how you can fix your own sub without having to recone the entire thing. If you have any questions about this, make sure you comment below. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by shopping at emfcaraudio.com or by following the Patreon link in the description below. You'll also find our Instagram and Facebook in the description below. Make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates and hit that notification bell so you'll get a notification every time we have a new upload. And I'll see you again in another Tech Stuff Tuesday.